So here we are, arriving at the plot. Compost wise, I'm doing pretty well. I've got 3 cubic meters on the go, and these will be ready spring, summer and autumn. This one's pretty hot actually, it's like 65, which is pretty good. Water wise, we're pretty well topped up, which is good, what you might expect after all this rain. So these are my early strawberries, the ones that will go into the polytunnel in sort of late January, early February. And I've got quite a few of those. I did a video all about early strawberries if you want more details of that. And I've got some little cuttings here, which all seem to have taken. So these are perennial kale cuttings. I'm going to move those into the polytunnel actually pretty soon, but yeah, happy with those. So this frame here was where I had the squash. They did really, really well. I was very pleased with them. And I'm extending these squash frames to other areas of the plot. But the result was that the sprouts got a little bit shaded, but not overly so. I'm still reasonably happy with the sprouts, and of course I always do these leeks around the edges and they all get really sort of bashed up when the sprouts are growing, but they all kind of recover, you know, over winter and into spring, and yeah, I still get a really good harvest. So I'm still sticking with that as an interplanting idea, although I've just got one gone to seed there. And then these are the beetroot that we're currently harvesting. As you can see, they've got rust, but I don't really care obviously at this time of year because they're pretty much fully grown. And then I've got my main leek bed, and this is the one that I almost pulled up because it got really bad rust, but actually they've all sized up really nicely. Now you can see, you know, I do like my leeks to be a bit more like salad onions. You know, we like them quite small, small and tender, and you just get more as well. So yeah, I really like growing them in bunches like this. Of course, it's more resilient as well. You know, if you get the odd failure, then the ones that are left, they just continue to grow on and are just a little bit bigger. The only challenge is weeding, you know, because it is a pretty dense bed. But yeah, really pleased with the leeks. There's a few hundred there. These are the only colettes I've got left. My main colette bed got clubroot for the first time. I'm not really sure what precipitated that because I have grown brassicas in there before. I don't know whether it's just a new thing that's happened this year or whether it's always been there, sort of lying dormant, waiting for the right conditions. But anyway, we're getting a few colettes now, which is really nice. And I got a few nice sprouts in here as well, although they are, you know, quite small. But I do kind of plant everything so close together. And the main reason that I'm not so worried is that we just had a huge harvest of sprout leaves off these plants. I mean, that's really the main reason that I grow them, although I do quite like sprouts as well. I'm not a massive fan, but I really like sprout leaves. Gooseberries, of course, are all finishing now. And this is the bed that had the colettes in it. I've taken them all out, yeah, as I said, because of the clubroot. And so what's in here now is leeks all the way around the edges, and these are looking a lot better than the ones in the other bed because they haven't got quite so bashed up. And although they're small, they will, you know, they'll be great in spring. So I don't really mind, you know, that they're a bit small now. And as I said, small ones are more tender. And then in this bed, kind of underneath this strulch layer, there's loads of field beans, and then around the outside, interplanted with the leeks, there's also loads of overwintering onions, the Japanese type of onions. So down this back border here, these are all my purple sprouting broccolis. So let's get out of the sun. So these are the clarets in this bed, the small ones. And these are the ones that will be harvested in spring. And they're small in part because they're underneath this tree. And so they don't get as much water and they don't get as much sunlight. But of course in winter and spring, they'll get plenty of light because there won't be any leaves on these trees. You know, there's an apple tree here and there's a great big tree above me. And then these down here, which get a lot more sun, these are the varieties that will be harvested in winter and early spring. So I'm pleased that I did it in that order. And then underneath this net, there's carrots. And these are the carrots that we'll be harvesting in late winter and early and mid-spring. And they're actually in a cold frame, and I will actually cut all the tops off them in maybe December or something like that, so I can put the cold frame lid on, which means I can keep on harvesting them even when it's frosty, and just, you know, all the tops don't go all mouldy and, you know, sort of create a slug trap underneath there. So then we've got a few trees, and underneath those trees we've got elephant garlic, and there's a few monobulbs that are kind of bursting into life there, probably ones that I forgot to harvest. But there's loads of other elephant garlic all underneath that wood chip. And then this is an early apple tree, and so it's got no apples on it. This is a cherry tree, and then these are the Brabants, and I'm gotta say I'm really happy with these Brabants this year. This is the first year we've got a harvest off this tree, and that is quite a lovely harvest. So these big tubs are where we had the courgettes, and so now they've got overwintering Japanese onions in them. And then this bed, actually, this had lettuces in it last week, and now it's got field beans. And you think, what a waste of a cold frame for field beans, but it's kind of an experiment for me to see how well field beans do in the middle of winter under plastic. I suspect they'll do quite well, but I don't know. So I want to do that experiment, and I want to do it because getting enough veg in the middle of winter, so by that I mean sort of from maybe the second week in December until the second week in February, or the first or second week in February, that is a very difficult time to be gardening. And I'm looking for something that will continue to actively grow during that period. And my suspicion is that field beans will, because broad beans did when they were in the polytunnel. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. And then as soon as we get into sort of the February period, sort of mid to late February, I can take those field beans out and plant some of my early brassicas. And I think I'll probably put something like my early red cabbages in there. So then I've got the carrots that we're currently eating, and they're pretty good. Really pleased with those carrots. And I might have a picture for you showing you some that we just harvested. And then in here we've got some Asian greens, we've got Kale, we've got Vibrant Joy, we've got Joy Choy. Yeah, so obviously just planted those. And then down here we've got turnips. These have been great. We've been harvesting these every week for a few weeks, and as soon as these are finished, which will be about 2, maybe 3 weeks time, I'll plant the last of these little lamb's lettuce stroke corn salads, and as you can see they're interplanted with salad onions as well. It may actually not be salad onions, I'm not quite sure looking at them now. Oh yeah, they are Guardsman salad onions. There's those little lamb's lettuce waiting to be planted. So in this bed we've got winter kale, and it's lovely at the moment. This was sown beginning of August, planted out in September, and it's doing really nicely. It's interplanted with these salad onions, and you know, they're still alive. I can't say they're struggling a little bit to find space, but I think they'll do all right. But this kale is just so nice. I mean, it has got a little bit of whitefly, but we don't worry about that at this time of year. It'll survive. Yeah, but being underneath this low cover here, this low tunnel, it is so tender by comparison with the stuff that we sowed back in spring. Yeah, so I'm kind of thinking maybe I'll do more of this in the low tunnels and plant it sort of really densely like this, because obviously it's growing slower than it would in summer, so it doesn't need as much space. And being planted later as well, it'll go to seed slightly later as well in spring. So yeah, I love this bed. Looking at beds that I love, just look at these Asian greens. So these are red pak choi, and then down there we've got tatsoi, and you can also see salad onions poking through. Everything's interplanted with salad onions at this time of year. I do have this other bed here of kale, and this one was interplanted with a bit of chard. You know, it's not as nice. It's not as nice as that later planted, but it's still okay, I'm not complaining. These posts give you a clue. This was the bed that had the asparagus in it, and I take my asparagus down at the beginning of October. I know some people leave theirs in, but for me it's creating too much shade on the rest of the plot. So what I've got in here now is I've got loads of different types of onions. So I've got red onions down the centre there, and they're just starting to break surface. And then I've got various different types of overwintered onions in here, and I like this as an interplant with the asparagus, because obviously the asparagus is going to be harvested until, let's say, the 21st of June, and that is kind of the time that these will be all harvested. So at the point at which the asparagus would be overwhelming them, I'm harvesting them. So it's a great interplant. And they don't seem to mind growing together. You know, obviously the onions are very shallow rooted by comparison with the asparagus. So they're taking nutrients and water from different levels in the soil. And because you're constantly harvesting the asparagus, it's not getting in the way of the onions really. So this is my youngest bed of spinach. I've just planted it today. And we probably won't get much of a harvest off this now until next year. Sometime in February, I should think growth will sort of pick up a lot. But being planted later, it'll go to seed just that little bit later. And it's planted very densely as well, which is kind of perfect for spring. So this is my only active lettuce bed, and it's looking pretty good. It's still giving a decent harvest of lettuce. I've also got some lettuce in hanging baskets, which will be ready in a week or so's time. But I've taken a bit of a risk this year, just having this one bed. But really, I find that I don't really want that much lettuce out in these low tunnels or coal frames. They're much better off with spinach and Asian greens and things like that, because by far the best place for growing lettuce in winter is the polytunnel. We'll look at the polytunnel in a minute. So these are my late June sown carrots, so they're fairly small. These are the ones we're eating in salads. And again, being under a coal frame, they'll have the tops taken off them in sort of December time. And I've got this bed of radicchio, and actually this is ready for harvest. I think I should have sown it a bit later, because you know, it's already at the point where it's going to start suffering if I leave it in any longer. And you know, it's all hearted up and ready, so that'll complement my lettuce in the salad mixes. And I've got another bed of beetroot there, and so all this beetroot and all these lettuces, radicchio, they'll be out by December time, and then this bed will be replanted with lettuces for spring in early December. This bed here is going to be a new strawberry bed, so I'm quite excited to get that planted, but the runners haven't arrived yet. Just got a few little lettuces just filling that little gap there. And I've got spring cabbages, and I'm just about to interplant those with winter miners lettuce, because there's some big gaps there, and I hate to see big gaps at this time of year. We need every inch that we can get. And then these posts are for my new winter squash frame, and where we're looking from at the moment is south, and so it's going to be a really nice little sun trap. And obviously these beds will still get loads of light, and then the winter squash will get loads of light as well, growing at a higher level. The winter squash is actually going to be planted in the paths, so it won't take up any bed space at all. That's why the posts run like this. So in here, this is the current spinach bed, the oldest spinach bed. It's got salad onions interplanted into it. You can see they're coming on really well, so a month or so's time I'll be eating those. And then we've got another bed of red pak choi down there. And in these containers we have got oca, a gorgeous little crispy lemony tuber for harvest in winter. You know, and to be honest, I was a bit unsure whether I would actually even get a harvest from this oca, because it just suffered so badly in summer. But of course now we've got loads of rain and it's really picking up nicely. In those tubs, that was where the New Zealand spinach was, and there's now tough ball onions in that one, and there's going to be red winter in that one, but they're going to be planted a bit later on. And then we've got another bed of spinach. That's 2 or 3 weeks away. That was sown 13th of September. And then those are my second early strawberries, and probably one of those low tunnels will go over those in early spring. A little pear tree there. I've had such an amazing harvest off that this year. And then down here we've got another spinach bed. It'll be ready for harvest in about a week, I should think. This little area is all stuff that's going in the polytunnel at some point. So we've got here parsley. Obviously parsley's doing really nicely outside at this time of year, so we're leaving it outside, but it'll be going in the polytunnel in probably, well, let's say November, and it'll really thrive in the polytunnel in a way that it just doesn't outside. And these containers of strawberries, these are the strawberries that were in the hanging baskets this year and were repotted into the containers in summer, and these will go into the polytunnel in spring for a kind of successional harvest. Some really lovely peas, and I'm just snacking on these on the allotment at the moment. But these are a late variety terrain. I've been pretty happy with them, to be honest. And just one container of chard for the polytunnel as well, and then 2 big containers of celery. And I think I sowed this celery back in July, and it's just a great size now for harvesting, cut and come again. And I'll just keep on harvesting this all the way through winter. So here's the polytunnel. I'll just skim you through this because I did a video on this not long ago. So I've got all my little seedlings here. Ones of note are my first succession of cauliflowers. I've got another one just on the go. I've got my wild rocket for planting out in spring. My red drumhead red cabbages, again for planting out in spring or late winter. Those lamb's lettuces, my next succession of celery. So I find those big plants, they'll be going to seed in sort of March, early April. So these are the ones that will just be coming on stream in April and May, and then I'll have the next batch for June and all through summer. These are all spares. Those are the miner's lettuce that I'm just about to plant out. These hanging baskets have just got little lettuces in, and these are the ones I'm just going to let really grow big and heart up, So hopefully these will be the ones that will be harvesting in midwinter, when all these other lettuces, which will have been harvested continuously all the way through November and December, these might need a little bit of a rest. Red onion sets all the way down the back there. You can see I've got my fleece in as well, so I can easily just drop the fleece over these beds if it gets really cold. I don't have to do it very often, but it's nice to have it all done and set up and ready, and it's not creating any shade because that's the north side of the polytunnel. And yeah, lettuces down here and salad onions, and then winter miner's lettuce and tatsoi and red pak choi, and some more lettuce and some salad rocket at the end, and then more lettuces in hanging baskets. And then just for completeness down here we've got the perennial kales, a bit rampant, but they will really thrive now that the weather's cooled down a bit. And I've got some cuttings that I took that got completely decimated by caterpillars, but they're all springing back to life down there. And then apple trees, that's a plum tree. These are looking quite nice as well, these apples. And another perennial kale. So that's pretty much it. So I hope you like this quick video. My name's Steve, this is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.